Shabbat Shalom. This week's Parsha describes a time of change, of dynamic change. By the end of Parshat Hukat, we know that the three main leaders of the Israelite people, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, will not finish the journey with the rest of the tribes into the land of Israel, that they will all die before they entered that promised land. And we consider that the pain of losing a dear one is an experience that we all face at one time or another in the course of our lives, whether it be a relative or a close friend, or here we see a leader or a mentor, that it is inevitable. And how we deal with loss is variable, and we understand that it can be messy and challenging. And in this week's Parsha, Miriam, for whom we just prayed those words, El Na Rafanallah, Miriam, these words that Moses says for his sister, passes away. And not much detail is given regarding her death, but we learn from Numbers that Miriam died there and she was buried there, and there was no water for the congregation. These two verses go right together, that she died there, she was buried there, and there was no water for the congregation. And when we have a simple reading of these two verses, we might conclude that there is no correlation between the two events. For how could one's death lead to water insecurity for a people? All we know is that Miriam, the sister who saved Moses' life months after birth and who played an important leadership role during the Israel's traveling in the wilderness, that she dies and she was buried, and immediately after we are told that there was no water. And so one important Jewish interpretive device is the idea of smichut. Smichut can usually be thought of under the context of grammar or connecting two words together. However, smichut can also function to connect ideas. If there are two passages that do not seem to be related but appear next to one another in close proximity, then this might not be a coincidence. In fact, the Talmud helps us understand that there is indeed a direct connection between Miriam's death and the lack of water. Tractate Tanait states that there are three miraculous gifts that were given to Israel in the desert, one of them being the well of water, the others the pillar of cloud and the manna. And so this well was available to Israel due to Miriam's merit. And when Miriam died, the well disappeared. Miriam's well is also listed in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, among the 10 miraculous items which were created at just the last hour of the sixth day of creation, just at twilight. So this miraculous well did not just issue water, but it also follows Miriam and therefore wandered in the wilderness together with the congregation. There's even a midrash of the idea that this rock literally rolls behind, this well rolls behind the Jewish people. And so when Miriam departs, the miracle stops and the well departs as well. And this is all to say that you can imagine the Israelite people find themselves in a particularly challenging place, both emotionally and physically. They've lost a leader, they've lost their source of life in many ways. And Moses is mourning the loss of his sister and is instructed by God to gather the people and to speak to a rock, thereby causing water to pour out. And we know the story. Instead of speaking to the rock, Moses' emotional state gets the best of him, and instead he strikes the rock and thereby loses his right to enter the land of Israel. And so Rashi, in his commentary on this same Talmud, Tanit 9a, makes further connection between the rock Moses hits and Miriam as well. He claims that this was the rock which contained Miriam's well. And this is that idea, this miraculously rolling after, the rock rolling after the people in the desert. And that when Miriam dies, the rock refuses to provide water. And so it is worth pausing and contextualizing just how important and precious water truly is. Not only is water one of the world's most life-sustaining substances, it is also an important element in Judaism. Throughout the Jewish written canon, water plays an integral role. So crossing a large body of water is often considered to be a transformative act, a step towards change. We see how Jacob encounters the angel of God at the crossing of the Jordan River, and this experience transformed him from being this kind of deceitful or scheming Jacob to the one who is struggling with God and becoming Israel. And when Israel's descendants crossed the Sea of Reeds, they were transformed again from Egyptian slaves into free tribes, into a free people. And 40 years later, when the Israelites crossed the River Jordan into the land of Israel, they were transformed yet again from wanderers of the wilderness into a nation of priests and warriors. We can also imagine the powerful experience of our more recent generations, our more recent ancestors, many of whom crossed large bodies of water when moving from Europe or all over the world and finding their homes in North America, transforming their lives in countless ways and ours as well. We also find within Judaism that water has a purifying role. There is a very long-standing tradition in Judaism of immersion in the mikvah for women and for men. That immersion is this final step in the process of conversion into the Jewish people. It is the process of emergence from a spiritual womb. There's also the tradition of nitilat yadayim, the washing of our hands before eating a meal, after visiting a cemetery. And one of our more beloved rituals of Rosh Hashanah is the tashlich service, the symbolic casting away of our sins into the water. Amongst other water-based rituals in Jewish living, there is, amongst other, at least one place where water from Miriam's well is to be found. It is Miriam's cup at the Passover Seder, which we join together this year as well. It is filled not with wine, but rather with water, in recognition of Miriam's and all other women's often forgotten or sidelined contribution to Judaism and Jewish life. And so perhaps it is time to add Miriam's cup to every Havdalah service at the conclusion of Shabbat. Perhaps it is time to add Miriam's cup into the fold of regular ritual practice of Jewish life. This is a way of reminding us of Miriam's life-giving contributions to our people. And so I'll conclude this evening in the words of the prophet Isaiah, who says, "Joyfully shall you draw water from the fountains of triumph." So this Shabbat, may your life be filled with joy and sustenance, and may you find that all of our glasses are half full. Shabbat Shalom.